Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these stories, but here I am. My life turned upside down in ways I still can't fully wrap my head around. I need to get this out because I feel like I'm losing my mind. So, a little background. My wife, Jeanette, and I have been married for 3 years. We were that couple everyone thought had it all. You know the type. Smiling in photos, planning trips, the perfect match. At least, that's what I thought. We were both in our late 20s, settled into our careers, and had a solid friend group. One of our closest friends was Tatiana, Jeanette's best friend since college. I got along with Tatiana fine, though she was always a bit much, loud, opinionated, and honestly, kind of controlling over Jeanette. But I figured that's just how some friendships are. Anyway, this all starts with a ski trip. Me, Jeanette, Tatiana, and a few of our friends rented a cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be a fun getaway, hot cocoa, late-night board games, and skiing during the day. But that's not what happened. On the second night, a freak avalanche hit. Out of nowhere. One moment we were drinking wine, and the next, the entire cabin shook. Snow crashed in through the windows, and the power cut out. Chaos. People were screaming. I barely had time to react before a wall of snow slammed against the house. I got separated from the group in the chaos. The next thing I knew, I was buried under snow with Tatiana, trapped in some air pocket between the wreckage. I don't even know how we survived, but we did. The others were in a different part of the cabin, and we had no way of knowing if they were safe. It was freezing, pitch black, and we had no clue how long we'd be stuck there. That's when things started to change. Tatiana and I spent hours huddled together for warmth. At first, we kept talking, trying to stay calm, but after a while, we just sat in silence. Every sound made my heart jump. Would someone find us? Would we even make it out? I had no idea. Eventually, we heard distant voices. Rescuers. Relief hit me so hard I nearly cried. When they dug us out, I remember the first thing I saw, Jeanette, standing there, eyes wide, like she'd seen a ghost. But instead of running to me, she just stood there frozen. Something about the way she looked at me was off. And I didn't understand why. Not yet. Getting pulled out of that wreckage was like waking up from a nightmare. My body was frozen stiff, my face was numb, and all I could think about was finding Jeanette. But when I finally saw her, something felt off. I expected her to run to me, hug me, cry, something. Instead, she just stood there, arms crossed, her face pale. When I finally made my way over, she let me hug her, but it felt mechanical. Like she was hugging a distant relative, not her husband who'd just survived an avalanche. "Are you okay?" I asked, still shaking from the cold. She nodded. "Yeah, I thought you were dead." Her voice was flat. Not relieved. Not overjoyed. Just weird. Tatiana, on the other hand, was all over me, checking my injuries, making sure I was stable. She even snapped at Jeanette, "Why are you just standing there? He just went through hell." Jeanette flinched and muttered, "I was just in shock." I brushed it off. Maybe she really was in shock. Maybe she'd spent the last few hours thinking I was gone, and her brain hadn't caught up yet. I wanted to believe that. We got transported down the mountain to a nearby lodge where they checked everyone for injuries. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. Cuts, bruises, some mild frostbite, but no one died. We were lucky. Or at least, I thought we were. That night, we were given separate rooms to rest. I was exhausted but couldn't sleep. My body ached. My mind kept replaying the moment of the avalanche. I turned over in bed, expecting to feel Jeanette beside me, but she wasn't there. I got up, wrapped myself in a blanket, and walked out into the hallway. That's when I saw it. Jeanette. Sitting on a couch in the lobby. Whispering to one of our guy friends, Eric. She looked upset, her hands moving fast as she talked. He was nodding, speaking softly, too low for me to hear. Then, she suddenly leaned into him. Way too close. I felt something cold settle in my gut. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something about the way she clung to him felt wrong. I stepped forward, and the second she saw me, she jerked away from Eric like I'd caught her doing something bad. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice normal. "What's going on?" Jeanette shot a quick glance at Eric before standing up. "Nothing. I couldn't sleep." Eric rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "She was just upset, man. She needed someone to talk to." I frowned. "Upset about what?" Jeanette exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. "Are you seriously questioning me right now? After everything we just went through?" That threw me off. I didn't say anything. "You're looking at me like you think I did something wrong." She scoffed, shaking her head. "Unbelievable." Eric quickly muttered, "I'm gonna head to bed," and left, leaving us standing there in silence. I wanted to let it go. I really did. But something in my gut told me this was just the beginning of something really bad. The next morning, I woke up sore, exhausted, and still unsettled from what I saw the night before. I wanted to believe I was overthinking things. Maybe Jeanette was just in shock. Maybe Eric was just being a good friend. Maybe I was just paranoid after nearly freezing to death. But the way Jeanette acted after that? No. Something was wrong. We had to stay at the lodge another day while the roads were cleared. Everyone else seemed to be in recovery mode, sharing their near-death experiences, trying to laugh off the trauma, sticking together like we'd all just survived a war. Everyone except Jeanette. She avoided me. Not in an obvious way, but in a calculated way. When we all sat down for breakfast, she picked a seat at the opposite end of the table. When I tried to hold her hand, she pulled away like she didn't even notice. When I asked her if she was okay, she just nodded stiffly and said, "I'm fine. I just need some space." Space? After almost losing each other? Tatiana noticed too. She leaned over at one point and whispered, "What's her problem?" I shrugged, trying to play it off, but inside, my stomach was twisting into knots. Then there was Eric. Every time I looked up, he was already looking at Jeanette. It wasn't in a casual way either. It was like he was watching over her, waiting for something. At one point, when I stepped outside to get some air, I came back to find them whispering again in the corner. Jeanette's arms were crossed, her body tense. Eric was nodding, his hand hovering near her shoulder like he wanted to touch her but knew better. The second they saw me, they both froze. I walked over. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Jeanette said too quickly. Eric cleared his throat. She's been through a lot." "We've all been through a lot. But apparently, she needed him to help her through it? Not me. Not her husband." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked away. Because, honestly, I was afraid of the answer I'd get if I pushed. The weirdness continued the entire way home. Jeanette barely spoke to me in the car. Whenever I tried to hold her hand, she kept it in her lap. When we finally pulled into our driveway, she let out this deep breath like she'd been holding it in the whole time. She got out of the car and grabbed her bag, already heading toward the house. I followed. "Jeanette, wait." She stopped at the door but didn't turn around. I swallowed. "Are we okay?" She hesitated. Then, finally, she turned to face me. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And with that, she walked inside, leaving me standing there with a sinking feeling in my gut. I didn't know what had changed, but something had. And I was about to find out just how bad it really was. The first few days after we got home were strange. Jeanette acted like a completely different person. She was distant, quiet, constantly glued to her phone. Normally, after a trip, we'd unwind together, talk about the best moments, go through pictures, plan our next adventure. But this time, nothing. She barely spoke to me. When I asked if she wanted to order takeout, she just shrugged. When I tried to cuddle up to her on the couch, she made some excuse about being tired and went to bed early. At first, I chalked it up to trauma. I mean, we did just survive an avalanche. Maybe she needed time to process everything. But then I started noticing the lies. It started small. One night, I heard her phone buzzing constantly while she was in the shower. I glanced at the screen. A text from Eric. Eric, are you okay? You seemed upset earlier. Earlier? When? We hadn't even seen him since we got back. I didn't touch her phone. I told myself I wasn't going to be that guy. Instead, I waited until she got out. Hey, I said casually, Eric's been texting you. She froze for half a second. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. Then she dried her hands, picked up her phone, and replied without even looking at me. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You didn't answer my question. She blinked. What? When did you see Eric earlier? Her face went blank. Then, too quickly, she said, I didn't. Lie. I knew she was lying. I didn't know how, but my gut told me. Still, I let it slide. But after that, I started paying attention. She'd take her phone with her everywhere. She'd step outside to take calls, claiming it was work. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see her screen lighting up. When I asked her who she was texting at 2 a.m., she'd snap, "No one, go back to sleep." Then, one night, I walked into the kitchen and caught her on the phone. The second she saw me, she jumped. I gotta go, she whispered into the speaker before hanging up. I stared at her. Who was that? She rubbed her forehead. Just Tatiana. Another lie. Tatiana never whispered on the phone. She talked at full volume no matter what time of day it was. I took a step closer. Jeanette, what's going on? She sighed heavily, like I was exhausting her. Nothing is going on, okay? You're making something out of nothing. Then why are you acting so weird? I almost lost you, okay? Her voice cracked. I thought you were dead. And now you're interrogating me like I'm some kind of criminal. And just like that, she flipped the script. I was the bad guy now. I exhaled, trying to stay calm. I'm not interrogating you. I need space, she cut in. Please. Just give me some time to get back to normal. I didn't like it. Not one bit. But I forced myself to nod. Okay. That was my first mistake. Because normal never came back. After that night, things only got worse. Jeanette barely spoke to me unless she had to. She spent hours on her phone, always tilting the screen away when I walked by. Whenever I tried to get close, she pulled away, saying she was tired or stressed or not in the mood. At first, I tried to be patient. I gave her space. I told myself she just needed time to process everything. But deep down, I knew something was off. Then, one night, Tatiana called me out of nowhere. Hey, she said. Are you and Jeanette okay? I frowned. What do you mean? She hesitated. I don't know. She's been acting weird. She barely talks to me anymore. And when she does, she's always defensive. Like she's hiding something. That set off alarm bells. Because Tatiana was her best friend. If Jeanette was shutting her out too, that meant whatever was going on was bigger than I thought. Has she said anything to you? I asked. Tatiana sighed. Not really. But, she hesitated again. Look, I don't want to start drama, but I saw her the other day. And she wasn't alone. My heart started pounding. Who was she with? There was a pause. Then, quietly, Tatiana said, Eric. I went completely still. When? I finally managed to ask. Yesterday, she admitted. I ran into them at a cafe downtown. When Jeanette saw me, she looked panicked, like she got caught doing something she shouldn't. My hands curled into fists. Did she say anything? She just gave me some excuse about running into him by accident, Tatiana said. But the way they were sitting, the way she looked at him, it didn't seem like an accident. A heavy weight settled in my chest. Jeanette lied to me. Straight to my face. I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. Thanks for telling me. Listen, Tatiana said gently. I don't know what's going on, but something isn't right. You need to talk to her. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I will. After we hung up, I sat there in silence, my mind racing. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't me overthinking things. Jeanette was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. That night, I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. I waited until Jeanette got home from work, watching as she tossed her purse on the counter and kicked off her shoes like nothing was wrong. Hey, she said flatly, not even looking at me. I didn't answer. I just stared at her. She finally noticed and frowned. What? I talked to Tatiana. That got her attention. Her whole body tensed. Okay. And? She saw you with Eric yesterday. For a split second, pure panic flashed across her face. But then, just as quickly, she covered it. Oh, she said, forcing a casual tone. Yeah. I ran into him while I was grabbing coffee. Lie. Tatiana said they were sitting together. I crossed my arms. Really? Just a coincidence. She sighed, already annoyed. Yes. I don't know why this is such a big deal. Because you didn't tell me, I shot back. Because every time I ask about him, you get defensive. Because ever since we got back from that trip, you've been acting like a completely different person. She rolled her eyes. I'm not acting different. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Are you serious? You barely talk to me, you flinch when I touch you, and now you're sneaking around with Eric behind my back. Her head snapped up. I'm not sneaking around. Then why lie? She hesitated. For a second, it looked like she might actually tell the truth. But then, she scowled. I didn't lie, she said through gritted teeth. I just didn't think it was worth mentioning. I scoffed. So if I was out having secret coffee dates with Tatiana and hid it from you, you wouldn't think that was a big deal? She crossed her arms. That's not the same thing. Why not? Silence. I took a step closer. Are you cheating on me? Her eyes went wide. What? No. Then why are you acting like this? I demanded. Why are you lying? Why are you pulling away from me? Why does it feel like I lost my wife the second we got out of that avalanche? Her face twisted. Because you don't understand. Then explain it to me. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Her jaw clenched, her hands curled into fists, and then, just like that, she turned away. I can't do this right now, she muttered. And then she walked away. Not even a fight. Not even an attempt to defend herself. Just nothing. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. After Jeanette walked away, I just stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, and for the first time since this all started, I had to admit the truth to myself. She was cheating. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I felt it. The lies, the distance, the way she looked at Eric, the way she wouldn't look at me. And the worst part? She didn't even try to deny it properly. No tears, no outrage, no reassurance. Just excuses and walking away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Jeanette lay next to me, pretending to be asleep. Her breathing was too controlled, too stiff. She knew I was awake. She just didn't care. Around 2 a.m., I rolled over and whispered, Jeanette. She didn't answer. I tried again. Jeanette. Nothing. But I wasn't stupid. I saw the way her fingers twitched slightly, how her breathing hitched for just a second. She was awake. She just didn't want to talk to me. I clenched my jaw, turned back over, and stared at the clock. I couldn't do this anymore. The next morning, I woke up to find Jeanette already out of bed. That wasn't normal. She usually slept in on weekends. I walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting at the table, sipping coffee with her phone face down on the table. She never put her phone face down before. Not until recently. I leaned against the counter. Where are you headed? She glanced up. What? You're up early, I said. Got plans? Her eyes flickered, just for a second. No. Lie. I sipped my coffee, watching her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Can I see your phone? I asked casually. Her whole body stiffened. Why? I shrugged. I just want to check something. She let out a short laugh. Check what? I set my cup down. Jeanette. Just let me see it. Her fingers curled around the phone like a vice. No. That's controlling, and I don't have to prove anything to you. That was all the confirmation I needed. I exhaled, pushing down the rage bubbling in my chest. You're unbelievable. She slammed her coffee down. Oh, I'm unbelievable? You're the one acting paranoid and accusing me of things just because I need space. Space to do what? I snapped. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I don't have to answer to you every second of the day, okay? I'm allowed to have my own life. I laughed bitterly. Your own life? Or your own affair? Her face turned red. You're being ridiculous. Then prove me wrong. Show me your phone. She didn't move. Didn't even blink. Seconds passed. The air was so tense it felt like the walls were closing in. Then, instead of defending herself, she grabbed her purse, snatched up her phone, and stormed toward the door. I can't deal with this, she muttered. I'm going out. And just like that, she was gone. No explanation. No attempt to reassure me. Nothing. I stood there for a long time, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. She was cheating. And now, I was going to prove it. The second Jeanette walked out that door, I knew I couldn't sit around waiting for more lies. I needed proof. Real proof. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I grabbed my phone, opened up my laptop, and started looking. First, I checked our shared phone account. Nothing obvious, just normal calls and texts. But then I noticed something strange. Jeanette had been making a lot of calls to a new number over the past couple of weeks. And the most interesting part? She always called it right after I went to bed. I copied the number and typed it into Google. No results. Then, I tried something else. I opened my phone and called it myself. It rang once. Twice. Then, click. Someone answered, but they didn't say anything. I stayed silent, my heart pounding. Then I heard breathing. Slow, careful breathing. Like the person on the other end wasn't sure what to do. I finally spoke. Who is this? Silence. Then, click. They hung up. I stared at my phone, my chest tight. That was all the confirmation I needed. Jeanette was hiding something. Someone. And I had a damn good idea who. The social media clue. Still riding the adrenaline, I opened up Eric's Instagram. I wasn't expecting much. He was smart enough not to post anything obvious. But then I noticed something. He had posted a story just an hour ago. Just a quick shot of his car parked in front of a cafe. The same cafe where Tatiana had spotted him and Jeanette together. I checked the timestamp. It lined up exactly with when Jeanette left the house. My blood ran cold. I went to Jeanette's Instagram next. Nothing new. But then I noticed she had recently archived a bunch of old posts. Almost every picture of us together was gone. She didn't delete them, just hid them. Like she was preparing for something. Like she was trying to erase me without making it obvious. I clenched my jaw, my hands gripping my phone so tight my knuckles ached. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Jeanette was cheating. And now, I just needed to catch her in the act. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for Jeanette to come home with more lies. No. This time, I was going to see it for myself. I grabbed my jacket, got in my car, and drove straight to that cafe. As I pulled into the parking lot, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I scanned the lot and, sure enough, Eric's car was right there. I parked a few spots away, angled just enough to get a clear view of the entrance. Then, I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Then, I saw her. Jeanette walked out of the cafe, her head tilted toward Eric as they spoke quietly. They weren't touching, but the way they stood close, the way she looked at him, it made my stomach turn. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. I could see everything I needed to see. Then Eric leaned in and said something. Jeanette hesitated, then nodded. And that's when they walked to his car together. My entire body went numb. I watched as Eric opened the passenger door for her, like a damn gentleman, and she slid inside without hesitation. He walked around to the driver's side, got in, and then they drove off. I didn't even have to think. I started my car and followed them. The final proof. I kept my distance, careful not to get too close. They drove for about 10 minutes before turning into a small apartment complex. Eric parked. Jeanette got out. And I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard I thought I might snap it in half. She followed him up the stairs to the second floor. They stopped at a door. Eric pulled out his key, unlocked it, and held the door open for her. She hesitated for half a second, just a half second, then walked inside. The door shut behind them. And that was it. That was my wife, walking willingly into another man's apartment. I sat there, staring at that damn door, my entire world crashing down around me. No more doubts. No more wondering. No more maybe I'm overthinking this. She was cheating. And no matter what her excuse was, I was done. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, and my mind was spinning. Jeanette was in Eric's apartment. My wife was in another man's home, alone with him, after lying to my face over and over again. I should have barged in. I should have confronted them right then and there. But I didn't. Because I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of turning me into the bad guy. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a picture of her walking inside. Time-stamped. Undeniable proof. I didn't know how long she'd be in there, and honestly, I didn't care. I started my car and drove straight home. Her lies unravel. About 2 hours later, I heard the front door open. Jeanette walked in, casually setting her purse down like she hadn't just spent the evening betraying me. She barely glanced at me. Hey. I sat on the couch, arms crossed. Where were you? She hesitated. Just for a second. Out running errands. I let out a sharp laugh. Errands. She nodded, avoiding my eyes. Yeah. I needed to clear my head. I reached for my phone, pulled up the picture, and turned the screen toward her. Her face drained of color. Does this look like running errands to you? I asked, my voice low and steady. She stared at the photo. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I waited. I wanted to hear her excuse. What kind of pathetic lie she'd come up with this time. Finally, she swallowed hard. I can explain. I scoffed. Oh, please do. I'd love to hear it. She ran a hand through her hair, her breathing shaky. It's not what it looks like. I laughed again, but there was no humor in it. Really? Because it looks like you walked into Eric's apartment after sneaking around with him for weeks. So tell me, what exactly am I supposed to think? Her eyes darted around the room, like she was searching for an escape. I just needed to talk to him. Talk. I repeated. Talk about what? She hesitated. Then finally she whispered, everything. I clenched my jaw. And by everything you mean what? How you've been lying to me. How you've been running around with him behind my back. Tears welled up in her eyes. I never meant for it to happen like this. Oh, so it did happen? I shot back. She froze. That's when I knew. She had no more lies left to tell. She knew she was caught. And there was nothing she could do to fix it. Jeanette just stood there, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was scrambling, trying to come up with something, any excuse, any lie that might make this go away. But she had nothing. I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp. "How long?" She blinked. "What? How long?" I repeated, my patience gone. Her lip quivered. She looked down, shaking her head. It's not like that." I exhaled slowly, gripping the arms of the chair so I wouldn't put a hole in the wall. "Cut the crap, Jeanette. I followed you. I saw you go into his apartment. I have the proof. So stop lying and tell me the truth." She swallowed hard. "A few weeks." A cold, sick feeling spread through my chest. "A few weeks," I repeated, my voice flat. She nodded, looking down at her hands. "It started after the avalanche. I was scared. I thought I lost you, and when we got back, everything felt different. I felt different." I let out a bitter laugh. "So your response to almost losing me was to go sleep with another man?" Her head snapped up. "It wasn't like that." I glared at her. "Then what was it like, Jeanette?" She wiped her eyes, her breath shaky. "I don't know." I was confused. Eric was just there when I needed someone to talk to. He understood what I was feeling. I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. "I understood what you were feeling. I was there too, Jeanette. I was the one buried in snow with Tatiana, thinking I'd never see you again. And instead of talking to me, you ran to him." She winced. "I didn't plan for it to happen." I scoffed. "Oh, right, because people just accidentally cheat on their spouses." She shook her head quickly. I didn't sleep with him." I stared at her, my jaw tightening. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying," she insisted. "We kissed, but that's it. I swear." I let out a slow breath, trying to control the rage burning inside me. "So you emotionally cheated, then?" She flinched but didn't deny it. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "Wow. Just wow." She stepped closer, reaching out. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I pulled back. Don't touch me." Her face crumpled. "I love you." I stared at her, my stomach churning. "No," I said quietly. "No, you don't. Because this wasn't love." And I finally saw her for what she really was. Jeanette stood there, frozen, her eyes wide and wet like she couldn't believe what was happening. But I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. She could cry all she wanted. Could say all the right things, try to twist the blame, make herself look like the confused, broken victim. I wasn't buying it. I turned away, running a hand through my hair, trying to think. But my thoughts were a mess, anger, betrayal, disgust all swirling together until I felt sick. Behind me, Jeanette sniffled. I never wanted this." I scoffed. "Yeah. Well, you sure as hell let it happen." She flinched but didn't argue. Because what could she even say? I turned back to face her. "You had so many chances to stop this. To be honest. To tell me what was going on. But instead you lied. You chose to sneak around with him behind my back." Tears streamed down her face. "I just didn't know how to." "You did know," I cut in. "You just didn't care." She let out a shaky breath, wiping her face. "I made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to text back," I snapped. "A mistake is buying the wrong kind of milk. Cheating isn't a mistake, Jeanette. It's a series of conscious choices." She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but for once, she didn't. Maybe because she finally realized there was nothing left to say. I stepped back, my voice steady. "I want a divorce." Her breath hitched. "No. Wait. Please." I shook my head. "I'm done." She reached for me again, desperate this time. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can. I backed away. No. You broke this. You don't get to decide now that you suddenly want to fix it. She let out a sob, her hands trembling. I love you. I stared at her, cold and empty. If you really loved me, you never would have done this. She opened her mouth like she had something else to say, some last-ditch effort to save herself. But I didn't care anymore. I grabbed my keys, turned my back on her, and walked out the door. For the first time since this nightmare started, I finally felt free. I drove for hours. No destination in mind. Just the open road, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I should have felt relief. Freedom. Closure. But all I felt was anger. Not the loud, explosive kind. No. This was quiet, cold and suffocating, pressing down on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. Jeanette had spent weeks lying to my face, sneaking around, running off to him instead of talking to me. And now, after everything, she wanted me to believe it was just a mistake? Screw that. Eventually, I pulled into a motel parking lot, shut off the engine, and just sat there. I wasn't ready to go home. Not yet. Because home wasn't home anymore. The friends start taking sides. My phone had been buzzing non-stop. Calls. Texts. I ignored them all, until I saw one from Tatiana. I sighed and answered. Where are you? She demanded. Not home, I muttered. She let out a sharp breath. I just talked to Jeanette. What the hell happened? I clenched my jaw. She didn't tell you? She's hysterical, Tatiana said. Kept saying she screwed everything up but wouldn't give me a straight answer. I exhaled slowly. She cheated. Silence. Then finally a quiet, I knew it. That caught me off guard. What? Tatiana sighed. I knew something was going on. I mean, I didn't have proof, but the way she was acting? The way she kept dodging my calls? It was obvious she was hiding something. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the ceiling. Yeah, well, now we know. Tatiana hesitated. What are you gonna do? I didn't even have to think. Divorce. Another pause. Then, good. That actually made me chuckle. That's it? Just good. She scoffed. What do you want me to say? That you should give her another chance? Hell no. She made her bed. Let her lie in it. I smiled slightly. Tatiana had never been Jeanette's biggest fan, and now she wasn't even pretending. But not everyone felt that way. The excuses start. The next call was from Eric. I let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the best of me, and I listened. Hey, man. Look, I know you're mad. And you have every right to be. But I need you to know it wasn't like that. Jeanette was just confused, and she needed a friend. That's all it was at first. I never meant for. Delete. I didn't need to hear any more. Then came the texts from our mutual friends. Dude, I don't want to pick sides. I get that you're hurt, but maybe you should hear her out. Are you sure you're not overreacting? It was just a kiss, right? I stared at my screen in disbelief. Just a kiss? So what, was I supposed to pat her on the back and say, "It's okay, sweetheart, as long as you only swapped spit with him and didn't sleep with him, we're all good"? No. Hell no. I didn't respond to a single one of them. Because the moment someone says, I don't want to pick sides, they've already picked a side. And it sure as hell wasn't mine. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Instead, I stayed in that crappy motel room, lying on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling while my mind replayed everything over and over again. Jeanette's face when I showed her the picture. Her weak excuses. Her refusal to show me her phone. Her walking into his apartment. It didn't matter how many times I ran through it in my head, the result was the same. She had betrayed me. And now, I had to decide what came next. By morning, I had my answer. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to bury her. The divorce papers. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I didn't want to drag this out. I wanted it clean, fast, and as painful for her as possible. Since we didn't have kids, and the house was mine before we got married, there wasn't much she could take from me. But there was one thing she would lose: her cushy, comfortable life. Jeanette had been relying on me to carry most of the financial weight. She worked, sure, but I covered the mortgage, the vacations, the nice things she loved so much. Without me, she was screwed. I had the papers drawn up that same day. Then, I went home. The final conversation. When I walked through the door, Jeanette was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes puffy and red. She looked like she hadn't slept all night. Good. She sat up quickly when she saw me. Oh my God, where were you? I was so worried. I cut her off by tossing the folder onto the coffee table. She stared at it. What is this? I crossed my arms. Divorce papers. Her face crumpled. No. Please, don't do this. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. We love each other. I shook my head. No. I loved you. You loved attention. She started crying again. I didn't sleep with him. I swear. It was just a kiss. I clenched my jaw. And 1,000 little lies. And sneaking around. And putting him before me, over and over again. Do you even hear yourself, Jeanette? She reached out, trying to grab my hand. Please. Just give me one more chance. I pulled away. No. Her breathing grew shaky. You don't even care, do you? You're just going to throw away 3 years of marriage like it's nothing. I laughed coldly. I'm throwing it away? You killed this marriage the second you made Eric your priority instead of me. She shook her head furiously. It wasn't like that. I was confused. I stepped closer, my voice low and firm. No, Jeanette. You were selfish. She broke then. Full on sobbing, shaking her head, repeating, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I just stood there, watching. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt nothing for her. No love. No pity. Not even anger. Just emptiness. I turned toward the door. Sign the papers, Jeanette. And with that, I walked out. For good. A week passed. Then 2. Jeanette tried everything. She called. She texted. She sent long emails, pouring her heart out, telling me how much she regretted everything. She even had mutual friends reach out, saying she was falling apart and deserved another chance. I ignored every single one of them. She made her choice. Now she had to live with it. The last meeting. I only saw her one last time, when she finally signed the divorce papers. We met at the lawyer's office. She looked awful. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept or eaten in days. But I didn't feel bad for her. She brought this on herself. She signed the papers with shaking hands. Then, after it was done, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. This is really it, isn't it? She whispered. I nodded. Yeah, it is. She swallowed hard. She stopped herself, wiping her eyes. Never mind. It doesn't matter. I didn't ask what she was going to say. I didn't care anymore. She left the office first, and just like that, 3 years of marriage were over. Moving on. It took time. A lot of it. But eventually, I stopped waking up feeling like I was suffocating. Stopped replaying every conversation, every lie, every betrayal in my head. Jeanette tried reaching out months later. One last pathetic email saying she missed me, that she'd made a mistake, that she wished she could take it all back. I deleted it without reading past the first sentence. As for Eric, from what I heard, they didn't end up together. Shocker. Once I was out of the picture, whatever illusion they had shattered. He ghosted her. Karma, I guess. But by then, I wasn't even angry anymore. I didn't care. Jeanette and Eric were just a bad chapter in my life, one I had finally closed for good. And me? I moved on, found happiness, and never looked back.